When the bombs fell and the lights died, there were no second chances. In cities reduced to rubble and silence, survival wasn't a hobby, it was instinct sharpened by necessity. Civilians didn't wait for rescue. They built, burned, scavenged, and endured with tools so crude and effective that some were later banned for safety reasons. What's wild is how many of these methods would still work today. When the next blackout hits, when the trucks stop rolling, when comfort collapses, these are the forgotten lessons of resilience, the World War II survival tricks so brutal they were outlawed after peace returned. When coal vanished and gas lines froze, people didn't freeze with them. They turned to their garbage. Empty food tins became makeshift furnaces known as tin can heaters or buddy burners. The method was genius in its simplicity. Civilians rolled strips of cardboard into tight spirals, packed them into old cans, and poured melted candle wax or paraffin over the top. Once lit, the wickless flame burned low, steady, and hot, enough to warm a small room or cook a ration meal. In shelters beneath London and Warsaw, hundreds of these silent heaters glowed in the dark. They produced no smoke, no crackling, just heat, the kind that kept babies alive through freezing nights. But they were dangerous. One wrong pour, one overfilled can, and the whole room could go up in flames. When the gas stopped flowing, kitchens went cold, and, well, electric cookers were rendered useless. Coal was rationed, and wood was nearly impossible to find in those bombed-out cities. That's when the paraffin stove, became the heartbeat of the home. These small, grimy metal stoves burned kerosene, often hidden away in tins beneath beds or tucked under floorboards. Just a few ounces of fuel could boil a kettle, heat some soup, or even cook a loaf of bread made from powdered potatoes and flour. The smell was acrid, and let's be honest, the fumes were toxic in those unventilated rooms. But for millions, that faint blue flame, it really meant survival. When coal became rarer than gold, people began to find fire where others saw only trash. Every morning, families would sift through the ashes from their grates with homemade sieves, searching for those unburned fragments of coal, tiny black gems buried in the gray dust. Those remnants were dried, pressed, or mixed with animal fat and flour to create makeshift briquettes. Messy, filthy, and astonishingly efficient, even the smallest batch could heat a room or boil a kettle. In wartime, silence could kill faster than bombs. When the power grid failed, radios powered by electricity or batteries became dead boxes. Civilians turned instead to the hand-crank radio, a relic of earlier invention that used nothing but human effort to create energy. A few minutes of cranking could power 10 minutes of broadcast. Families huddled in cellars, turning the handle in rhythm while the air filled with static, waiting for the faint voice of a BBC announcer or a coded resistance message. That distant sound, crackled, calm, human, meant connection. It restored hope. Even today, when Wi-Fi drops and batteries die, the crank radio still works. It remains the heartbeat of resilience, a sound older than fear itself. When enemy blockades cut off imports and hunger became another form of warfare, the solution came from soil. The Victory Garden wasn't a hobby, it was a weapon against starvation. Civilians received tin kits of seeds, tools, and instructions: carrots, cabbage, beets, beans, the most calorie-dense, soil-tolerant crops known. Families planted them everywhere: courtyards, rooftops, bomb craters, even bathtubs. By 1943, nearly half of all vegetables eaten in Britain came from these gardens. They turned ordinary citizens into the largest decentralized food network in history. It demanded tireless work, composting scraps, saving seeds, watering by hand when pipes ran dry. But it proved a deeper truth. Food security didn't come from supply chains, it came from soil and sweat. When night fell, light meant death. One flicker from a candle could draw enemy bombers. To survive, civilians learned to vanish. They nailed wool blankets over doors, hung blackout curtains over windows, and painted glass panes black. Wardens patrolled the streets, shouting at anyone careless enough to let a crack of light escape. Inside, families huddled in rooms lined with heavy fabric, conserving warmth and concealing glow. Wool was chosen because it stayed warm even when damp and resisted burning. One uncovered lamp could doom an entire street. That's how fragile the balance was, between safety and exposure, between warmth and invisibility. When bombs shattered pipes and taps ran dry, people turned to the past. They used manual water pumps, rusted, squealing relics of an earlier century. With every pull of the handle, cold water rose from underground wells, drop by drop. Families lined up for hours to fill buckets and bottles. Contamination was a constant danger, so they filtered through sand, cloth, and charcoal, then boiled what they could. It was exhausting, freezing work, but the pump never failed. It didn't need power, it simply worked. The most haunting survival trick came from desperation itself: homemade shelters. When official bunkers overflowed, families dug their own into the earth beneath shattered homes, bracing the walls with scrapwood and steel. They were damp, cramped, and easily flooded, yet they saved thousands during nightly raids. Governments later banned them, calling them death traps, but for those who survived inside, they were miracles of instinct. They didn't call themselves preppers, they didn't live-stream their ingenuity or #resilience, they just survived because no one else was coming. Mothers, children, grandparents, ordinary people turned waste into warmth, trash into tools, silence into safety. Their strength didn't come from wealth or power, it came from knowledge, the kind passed from hand to hand, now almost forgotten. Today we rely on grids, deliveries, and digital comfort, but when the system fails, as history promises it always does, only those who remember the old ways will keep standing. So before you scroll, before you forget, remember this: comfort never taught anyone how to survive.